Wishwa, it's an online platform for social champions, for change makers, everyday change makers that we see around us, who have put decades of work, of their lifetime, their earnings, into making a difference, to serve others, and to make our world a better place.
दो साल पहले यहाँ बहुत ड्राउट होया, वाटर स्कैरसिटी हुआ था और मानसून भी फेलियर हो गया। बहुत डिफिकल्ट टू सर्वे किया, तो मैंने क्या था फॉर टाइम बिंग के लिए यहाँ शिफ्ट करके जाएंगे। दो दिन बंदे मिलके सबको घर चले गया, चलिए सबको बुलाया, एक मीटिंग बनाया, इसको कैसे भी सॉल्व करने।
ഞങ്ങളെല്ലാവരും ഈ ഗ്രാമത്തിലെ 10-30 വീട്ടുകാരുണ്ട്. ആ 30 വീട്ടുകാരും ചേർന്ന് പണികളെല്ലാം ചെയ്ത് പൂർത്തിയാക്കി ഒരു ടാങ്ക് കെട്ടാൻ തീരുമാനിച്ച്.
WaterAid ने ये बताया था, why 1 or 2 hours you will get the water, why don't 24 hours you can get. वो बहुत पसंद आया हमें।
വീടുകളിലും കണക്ഷൻ കൊടുത്ത് ഇപ്പോൾ ടാപ്പ് ഇട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. മീറ്റർ എല്ലാം വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. പത്ത് മിനിറ്റ് പോലും വെള്ളമില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ആ ഏരിയയിൽ 24 hours വെള്ളം കിട്ടുമെന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ അത് ഭയങ്കര സന്തോഷമാണ്. അത് ആ സന്തോഷം എങ്ങനെയാണ് കാണിക്കുക, പറയുക?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to WishwaTalks. My name is Trishant. Thank you for attending today's event. For those of you who have attended a WishwaTalk before, a warm welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, here's a little bit about us. WishwaTalks is a space to expand the horizons of your mind. Every webinar, we call experts from different domains to discuss and examine opinions, issues, problems, and perspectives. Each webinar is an interactive session where we all walk away with more respect for each other and a deeper understanding of the topic at hand. If you miss a session, please visit our website or YouTube channel for a full library of past WishwaTalks on interesting topics. Today on WishwaTalks, we will be discussing a very salient topic. Every drop counts, achieving water security for rural India. Our speaker for today's WishwaTalks is Mr. Rajesh Rangarajan, State Program Director of WaterAid India for the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and he will lead us through a session in just a few moments. Rajesh Rangarajan is an experienced environmental sector professional with over 20 years of experience in program management, research, and advisory services and government engagement. He is also an interdisciplinary expert covering environmental quality, sustainability, and environmental governance. His specific domain expertise lies in environmental management, energy efficiency, climate change adaptation, waste management, and pollution prevention, water conservation, and water sanitation and hygiene, that is the WASH project. Before we get started, I would like to inform our audience that our speaker will be taking questions from you after our main talk. So please leave your questions in the chat or raise a hand, and we will allow you to ask your questions in person. I request everyone to turn on your webcam while interacting with the speaker. Now, without further ado, I invite our speaker to begin today's WishwaTalk. Hello again, sir.
Thank you, Trishant, for the very detailed introduction, I must say. Often I sometimes realize that it's way too detailed and I should try and concise my introduction. But again, thank you for thinking of me and giving an opportunity for me to share WaterAid's work, experiences, and insights. So this is not something that I, as you know, any expert is sharing. This is largely through the work that we've been doing in WaterAid. And this is not just something that has happened over the last few years. WaterAid has been, working diligently over the last 35 years in India and refining its strategy over a period of time to ensure that, we keep in sync with the changing times in terms of how over the last 30 years, There are various environmental shocks and societal shocks that have hit our country, and we have tried to adapt to that and continue to work in the space of water to ensure that many of our marginalized rural communities actually have water, just like we sitting in urban India have water at the turn of a tap, right? So what I'm going to do is I have a few slides, and I will use the slides as a way to structure my talk. Like Trishant mentioned, it'll be useful if you can actually pose more questions rather than me continuing to give a monologue for 35 minutes. So
Sure.
so yeah, I'm sorry, there is some disturbance potentially. I have intimated them to shut the drilling work. I hope they stop quickly, but this is something that's beyond my control. But is my voice still audible?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Okay, great. All right. So, so what I thought I'll do today is instead of just talking about water security, which perhaps many of us in this sector already know about, I wanted to use this opportunity to kind of frame this in the conversation of changing climate and how is our work, what are the experiences from our work and the insights that we have learned to deliver on water security, to support communities to become more water secure, right? We don't have a solution. We are facilitating the community to come up with its own solutions, and we are merely supporting that process. So my talk will broadly be about three parts. The first part, I'll take a minute or two to introduce WaterAid. It might be a new entity to several people. Then I will briefly talk about the situation of water in India, particularly rural India, and what is it that we are faced with and what is it that we are likely to face as we move ahead. And the third part of the talk would essentially pertain to our strategy, our approach, and how we see one could achieve water security in the rural context. Let me start with introduction to WaterAid. WaterAid is essentially an international not-for-profit organization. It works in the space of water and sanitation. In India, it is registered as Jal Seva Charitable Foundation, and I think it was started in 1986. Now we are present almost in 13 states, about 35 plus districts, and about 6 cities. And our bread and butter work is essentially providing rural water sanitation and water supply services. And this we do in a way that which is not like how the private sector would deliver, or which is on a cost basis, or where government would deliver, which is on a welfare basis, right? Now, this is something that we are trying to, in some sense, hybridize, largely through philanthropy and, charity work. But what we want to do is ensure that this is sustainable, and for it to be sustainable, for the work we do to be sustainable, we really want to go deeper into how we can create processes where the community is able to take ownership and sustain what some of the others can do, including WaterAid does for them. And this is really what sort of separates us from many other organizations. If you look at the approach, Trishant, I think the slides, do you want me to operate the slides?
No, we'll operate it right away.
Okay.
Just a second.
So if you can just let it roll.
The presentation up. Here you go, sir.
Thanks, Trishant. So this is so WaterAid is actually part of a global federation. That's something I forgot to mention. We have 7 global members. WaterAid India is an associate member to this global federation. We have several country programs which are managed by these global federation members across the world. And our joint mission of the entire WaterAid global community is to reach everyone everywhere by 2030. And why 2030? Of course, it aligns with the sustainable development goals that we are thinking of. And the way we work, we want to facilitate this process and help everyone reach that 2030 goal collectively. And that's why it's everyone everywhere by 2030. And everyone everywhere is also important because many of the schemes that today governments undertake, all in good intention, many of the measures that are taken up by private sector, all in good intention, we know cannot touch everyone everywhere. There are people who are getting left behind. And a large part of WaterAid work is to try and map these people and ensure that these people also have the benefit of those services. So this is something that I already mentioned. We're international not-for-profit. In India, we are registered as Jal Seva Charitable Foundation. So we are a pure play Indian entity now, like every other not-for-profit in India. We raise resources both internationally and through domestic resources. And this is our sort of overall footprint in India. I work out of Hyderabad, and here we look after two states, Andhra and Telangana, the Telugu states, Deccan region, so to speak. And a bulk of my experience is going to come from managing some of our programs here in these two states, and also in a couple of other states, Kerala and Karnataka, which we are part of. Now, of course, Karnataka has a separate state office. And the video that you saw was from Kerala. And if time permits, Trishant, I'll talk a little bit about the Kerala case study. I briefly put up some numbers here just to let you know that this is a kind of reach that we constantly endeavor to achieve. People with access to toilets, people with access to clean drinking water, people with access to hygiene education and hygiene awareness. And this is also a slide to mention that we are fairly serious about the way we track our outcomes. And when we say no one is left behind, this is really how we track them, and we ensure that the outcomes are really quantifiable and the beneficiaries actually get every rupee, rather than it being spent on multiple other reasons. So we also, while we are working, we know that others also would like to contribute. So we adopt a strategy of leveraging, primarily through government resources, government schemes, and also helping CSR target their investments so that it can be a collaborative effort where private sector, civil society such as WaterAid, and government can come together in a sort of tripartite collaboration and deliver these initiatives at scale. Right? So I'll just take a little bit to talk about our thematic areas. So we have 4 specific thematic areas: safe, assured drinking water at the household. And like I mentioned, our endeavor is to try and sort of mimic what happens in urban India in some sense, the good ones, of course, not all the bad stuff, that every household has a tap. We have a tap connection at our homes, and we often get water whenever we want. So that assured drinking water of, say, the minimum of 55 liters per day per capita is something that is assured to every citizen. Safe, because we know there are several water quality challenges, which I'll talk about briefly in the next couple of slides. So safe, assured drinking water at household level is what we endeavor to do. And that's a very big focus for us. And in those areas where we are fixing issues around water, and we are ensuring that apart from drinking water, there is water available for domestic purposes, we also address the issue of sanitation. And when I say we address the issue of sanitation, what we are essentially trying to do is letting people understand the need for sanitation, helping them change behaviors so they themselves build their own toilets. And then there is a sustainable change in the way that sanitation comes about. Thirdly, we have hygiene, and we feel it is an important component of the entire WASH package. It's a very cross-cutting theme. Hygiene is very critical to break the infection chain. We endeavor to ensure that many of our programs have hygiene embedded in it. It could be a pure play water program where we are looking at, say, groundwater recharge measures, but we will look at introducing hygiene into that component, simply because we know that water that will then be provided needs to be handled safely and in a hygienic manner. And even messaging around safe handling of water is important to ensure that the water is supplied is actually safe. So, and finally, we have wash-in institutions. By institutions, we refer to three specific types of public institutions, which is healthcare facilities, Anganwadi centers, and schools. And we know that these three institutions are really the pillars of any functioning society, particularly rural societies. And if these institutions do not have wash services, they in turn will not be able to provide that kind of support to the societies that they're catering to. So these are our four thematic areas, and bulk of our work rotates around our packages and programs are designed around these particular four thematic areas. Okay, so what's our approach, and what perhaps differentiates us from some of the other organizations that are working in this space? Well, there could be several overlaps, and I'm not saying we are the only ones doing this, but we have a specific approach, and we feel that this definitely has worked for us over the last 3 decades, right? So the first very significant approach that we take is that we specifically work with those people who have been left out of the mainstream. So people who are highly vulnerable to water shocks, environmental shocks, people who are highly marginalized. They're nomadic. They are not part of the mainstream habitation. They are, for some reason, we come across this term. They are SC/ST community, or they are the Nayak community, and they're often kept out of the main habitation. And some of these communities don't have, they might have a water source, but they will not have enough infrastructure to take it to their housing, right? So these excluded and marginalized communities are one of our first target groups. Of course, this is not to say that we don't work in, say, urban areas. We do work in urban slums. We also work in, some towns, some urban centers, in district headquarters, and so on. But our prime focus is to ensure that these communities, excluded and marginalized communities, are served first. And then a second key approach that we take is to look at mandated institutions. Now, these mandated institutions are nothing but institutions that are set up through our 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, where the entire process of self-governance is decentralized, and institutions are created at the grassroots level for communities to self-govern themselves. And we have a bunch of such structures in our in the wash space. We have what are called village water and sanitation committees, which are very specific to address village water and sanitation issues. They are represented by several key stakeholders in the community, and they are able to decide for themselves what is important. And there are ways in which government works with these institutions in order to provide what is needed on water and sanitation. The third thing we do is technical support. This is again for state governments and district administration, where some of our work is actually showcased to them in the form of technical, not necessarily technological, but technical, so to speak, where we are able to share some designs of our work. We're able to share some, approaches, etc. And this is something that will help us scale our work at the district and the state level. And additionally, some part of our work also, it's not stated very obviously, but inherently and implicitly, a large part of our work actually focuses on women and youth. And I'll talk about that towards the last slide when we talk about building social capital, right? So now, if you look at the scenario of water in India, you will, this is not statistics that are, that you may not have seen. We've just consolidated different kinds of information, and we're providing this summary statistics here. So we know that 45% of rural households having exclusive access to improved principal source of drinking water located in their premises. This is 45%, right? 18% of rural households have pipe water supply in their dwelling, which is actually significant. But if you look at the other side of it, this is not very significant. There is still a fairly large percent of population which are not part of the grid, which do not have access to pipe water supply, right? So this is one of the significant challenges that we are currently facing in rural India. Next one, please. So, of course, in the urban setting too, we have 35% urban households who have individual water supply in their households, which is understandably so, because urban centers are much better serviced than rural areas. But if you look at what happens in terms of how other people within the population segment, say children and elderly and so on, there are many of them don't have access to drinking water. There are 8 million children below the age of 14 in urban India who are at risk, and 5% of world's 20 largest cities under water stress are in India, which is, with Delhi being second on the list. And, several of us would have seen these headlines, Durban reaching zero water, Chennai was supposed to reach zero water day, and so on. So these were all, these were real, and we are beginning to perceive these challenges more and more now, right? Next is the issue of, water quality itself. Can we move on, please? Next one. Okay, so before we go to water quality, one of the significant issues in India is that we are still one of the largest nations which are dependent on groundwater. And the unlikely statistic that many of us will think industry is the biggest consumer of groundwater, but it is actually irrigation that is the biggest consumer of groundwater, and the irrigation sector gets a lot of free water, free power, and so therefore they are big guzzlers of groundwater, and domestic use of groundwater is at 9%. And if you see both in urban and rural, a significant portion of our water security actually comes from groundwater sources. And in particular, please note this statistic, because the rest of my talk is kind of going to focus on this, is that 85% of rural water requirements are fulfilled by groundwater, because pipe water supply is still a pipe dream in rural India. It's easier for them to actually dig a bore well and get water rather than wait for someone to provide pipe water services. Okay, so this is how the water scenario is looking like. And the implications of such a water scenario, some of it I'm just sharing now, very top highlights, is that you're looking at deaths and disease due to water-related illnesses, lack of hygienic, lack of good quality water, lack of hygienic conditions, etc. And you're looking at 42% of India being fairly drought prone and dry, which is going to have its implications in terms of health. And this is exacerbated with climate change effects. And with a fairly large percent of population now, world's population being in India, we only have about 4% of world's freshwater resources. So these are challenges statistics that really stand out. And this is the basis of our continued endeavor and motivation to work in this space. So moving on, there is this case study of Palakkad. You saw this, you saw the video some time back. And this is really the package that, we try to put together. First is that we look at understanding the issues in a particular Gram Panchayat. So we work in what are called Gram Panchayats. Many of you would know this. So Gram Panchayats are essentially villages or a cluster of villages. Some Gram Panchayats are just one large village. Some Gram Panchayats are a bunch of villages and habitations, which are extension of these villages. So we take stock of what's the dynamics through a baseline survey. And in Kerala, we found that, last 4 to 5 years, they've been repeatedly hit by flood and drought alternatively, right? And of all the places, imagine Kerala having a situation like this, which is actually endowed with forests and a lot of water resources. But somewhere they let go of their duck well culture and they started depending on pipe water. And the picture on the right actually amply demonstrates this. So we tried to go back and understand why the duck well culture, where was it misplaced, and then whether it could be part of their water security paradigm, and could we bring it back into mainstream, right? So, so one of the things that we did in Kerala was to look at what is the package of solutions apart from pipe water supply that we can provide. So duck well, pipe water supply, both of them seem like things that we could do. The duck well culture essentially addressed the issue of reviving shallow aquifers, while pipe water supply was built on bore wells from deeper aquifers. So we had to look at ensuring that those deeper aquifers also are addressed. So we had to do a lot in terms of what we call source sustainability measures. So even if you put a bore well, we need to ensure that the bore well sustains water over a period of time. So in the Kerala context, if you see, it gave us an opportunity to work on multiple aspects on water security. And from the Kerala example, I want to go to some specific strategies that we have undertaken more recently over the last 5 years, and which has become mainstream to our programs, right? So what are these essentially? What are these, basic lessons that we have learned, and what is it that others can replicate? So the first is things that we found that pipe water is essential, right? But of course, doorstep pipe water supply is essential for people to reach that 55 liters LPCD per day. But what happens when the source itself dries up? What do communities do? What do rural communities do? Right? So they often face shortages. And in lean seasons, particularly, the only go-to source that they have is the local well, which has been providing them water from shallow aquifers over the last many decades. Right? So this becomes a lifeline of the community. So, and there is also these, erstwhile hand pumps that have been put up as part of various government measures, local funds, Gram Panchayat funds. And these are all infrastructure that is just lying there, waiting to be reused. So this is something that is our first approach to try and ensure that these duck wells and hand pumps are restored. They become the critical lifeline for the community. And once this initial critical hardware is restored, some bit of their water supply is actually addressed. And then we embark on ensuring the more detailed program of a pipe water supply, where we try and revive the source. Typically, there are only about 1 or 2 sources in a habitation. And there, if you see, these bore wells are either private and somebody has put it and somebody's provided pipelines, and it goes to some part of the community and they use stand posts to collect this water. Now, can we ensure that this can be expanded and doorstep supply can be provided? And that's our entire pipe water supply program. This is anywhere between 100 to 150 households. It costs us about 15 lakhs. We provide the source, provide the pipeline, the overhead tank, and then the stand post to ensure that all of this reaches the doorstep. We also do a water quality test, a lot of water quality testing. I will come back to it in the subsequent slides. So now I talked a little bit about our strategy for shallow aquifers, the duck wells and hand pumps, right? Now, what about the bore wells, which is actually taking water from the deeper aquifers? Now, many of us would know that today bore wells are actually going deeper and deeper. People are sucking harder and harder into our ground for water. But nobody is actually thinking of recharging this. There is a lot of rhetoric around this. There is a lot of publicity and campaigns going on around this, but is it effectively being done? This is even more challenging in urban, but relatively easy in rural, I must say. And if you actually plan this better at very minimal cost, with minimal, technology, with very effective, simple technology, we should be able to achieve this. And that is the silver lining that we have. And that is something that I want you all to take away from this. So on the top left, if you see, this is basically what is called an injection well. It is also something which we also called an abandoned bore well. Essentially, several bore wells which were put earlier have dried up and people have stopped using this. So what we simply do is try and channelize water into these abandoned borewells, provide the necessary perforation so water actually goes in. And if required, we take the borewell shaft inside to ensure that the water is actually directly recharged into the aquifer. And once this is done, we find that even within one hydrological cycle, the community easily has another source for it to harness water from. So this is something that we have done in many of our interventions where we have done pipe water supply to ensure that the source is well protected. Now, the second most common thing is rainwater harvesting. Rainwater is perhaps still the purest form of water that we get, apart from water from deeper aquifers. Of course, with pollution, etc., increasingly it is becoming a challenge. But a large part of this rainwater is not being managed, it's not being harvested. So if they can be stored and the excess can be recharged through simple storage structures and recharge structures, you will find that that will practically compensate for 20-25% of water that we are actually using. In fact, we have noticed that in several of our interventions, rainwater harvesting structures help to recharge in a very localized manner, recharge local aquifers for that school to be using it. And we found that suddenly the borewell of the school has actually been revived, and one fine day they're able to actually get water from it, right? So so we decided that we will intensify these recharge measures both at two levels, at shallow aquifers and deeper aquifers. The main strategies being recharge pits, rainwater harvesting structure, etc. for shallow aquifers. For deeper aquifers, we are looking at simple technologies like abandoned borewell recharge structures and injection wells. And these all happen anywhere in the range of 25,000 to 50,000 to 75,000 rupees of a unit cost, which is something is not a very large sum today. And this is, in fact, we are trying to scale this down more and more because we know that let's take the example of a mobile phone, for instance. Today, with so many players, including Reliance, all of them entering the market, your smartphone is so cheap. So, and that's the reason why the penetration of smartphone is so much more. And now if we go into rural India and we say, we have a fancy technology for 1.5 lakhs and we would like to put this in your community, they will tell us, great, you have some money, please go ahead and put it. We'd like to see how it looks like, fine. I mean, but we have nothing to do with it. It's you came with your money and you put it up, right? But if we can make it so attractive that 1.5 lakh actually comes down to 15,000, which is a fairly small pot of money which the community can mobilize and actually start to replicate that structure across the habitation, across the Gram Panchayat, you will automatically help them solve their problem. And this is where we are really trying to get to. So our high tech is actually low tech, so to speak, right? And this is something that can also be done with very locally available material, with local masons, plumbers, and simply achievable within a fairly short period of time. So this is really our strategy in terms of how we look at source sustainability, which is our very first step to ensure water security, right? Krishnan, just flag the time in case I'm overshooting.
Yes, sir.
So you talked. I mean, one of the questions that you might be having in mind is that you're talking so much about source sustainability and recharge. How the hell do we know where to do the recharge, right? How do we know what is underneath us? Where do we know where the water is going? You might often hear this excuse that I am putting a recharge pit in my apartment and it is only going to benefit my neighbor. What is the point of me investing capex of say 50,000 on putting a recharge pit when my neighbor is going to benefit, right? So the point here is that there are aquifers here at play which are either localized or which are large and which can actually help serve a very large geography. But we need to understand this. We need to understand our aquifers. We need to connect our communities with the aquifers, and we need to do our recharge efforts in a way that these aquifers are targeted properly, and we can maximize the impact of the water that we are recharging. So as we were doing a lot of source sustainability work, we came across this organization called Aquadam, which helped us figure this out, right? They said there are simpler ways of doing aquifer mapping. basis your measurements of bore wells and duct wells, you will really be able to understand where your aquifers are. So then you can locate your bore well recharge structure or your injection shaft accordingly and ensure that you have better bang for your buck. And so what I'm showing here is essentially a slide from that initiative, which is in North Karnataka, in Raichur and Gulbarga, where we had done this effort. We are now mainstreamed it in many of our programs. So here we were able to actually target our recharging through this aquifer mapping and managed aquifer recharge approach. And this is something that I would also request many of you working on water to look at. In very simple ways, we involve the community, both their anecdotal information and with simple data collection around their bore wells and duct wells, and with simple analysis and interpretation of results, which we take back to the community and let them know that these are where your aquifers are. This is why your pond has perennial water. This is why your farm pond keeps drying up. So therefore, we will be recharging here to ensure that your farm pond has some dead storage for your cattle to take care of, and some fishermen can have their livelihood even in their acute summer months, right? So so this is really the package in terms of water security that I wanted to sort of talk about.
So that's
and
a wonderful present.
Here, just to sort of do you have some time, Tushar?
Yes, sir. You can take it.
How many more minutes?
So 5 more minutes. We'll
Okay.
start with the questions. Yeah.
Okay. So not only do we look at just the interventions that I talked about within the habitation, we also see that there are other opportunities within or just outside the habitation as well. So for example, schools have such a large such large tracts of land, public schools, that there's so much of water that falls here. And if you're able to harness the water from these premises, from the roofs of these schools, from the runoff from the premises, and not let any water out of the premises and recharge them, that actually helps us to get more from the initiative that we undertake for the habitation. So similarly, if you see on the right, it is a simple grey water treatment structure in a school. So the water that comes from hand washing and all of that is also recycled. So in some sense, we are looking at closing the loop, ensuring that not only are we harvesting, but we are also recycling the water that is generated. Post-use water is also recycled, right? And that water is also treated and recharged. And this is what is happening in urban India. But if we can kind of scale this up in rural India, I think we would go a long way in terms of water security. So just in terms of finally, how do we manage all this, right? As through our interventions, and like I mentioned, if you roll to the next slide, there are several people within the community who are really the ones who need to be doing this. It's not WaterAid, it's not any other NGO. It's really the social capital that is within the community, right? So there are youth, there are women, there are several champions who have done this. There are farmers who are willing to do this. There are people who have some skills in terms of plumbing, repairs, etc. How do you galvanize this community? How do you build the social capital with these people and not bring in something that is extraneous and leave it and then exit, right? So our main strategy, therefore, is to ensure that we build this cadre of grassroots technocrats. So they are, of course, specialists in their own way. They know what is best for the habitation. They have a simple set of skills which they can deploy. Can we just refine it? Can we just own this? And can we just give them direction so they can take care of their water quality? They can ensure that water is supplied appropriately. They can ensure that operations and maintenance of these assets are taken care of. We are now also working on a project where we're looking at providing finances for communities to actually do their own in an enterprise model. So operations and maintenance is actually something that could be profitable. This is what we are seeing in some of our interventions in North Karnataka and in Guntur, where this is actually becoming an enterprise and giving livelihood. And instead of just being philanthropy, this is actually moving to livelihood generation. So this is the final formula in order for us to make water security work. And the last slide, which I leave with, is really the template, which is a summary that I want to leave with all of you. So we look at active involvement, community participation, which is very critical for us. We know without that, everything fails. There's a large part of it requires awareness creation, knowledge sharing, and so on. And bulk of this work requires inclusive planning. Like I said, they will always see you as WaterAid. WaterAid is a pot of money and they want to do something, but they will never get involved in it unless we look at involving them more systematically. The fourth step is to look at developing volunteers cadre and then building their capacities. And very importantly, looking at operations and maintenance. Now, this is something that governments and others, private sector, when they do it through contract mode, they are unable to do this. The cost is very high. The community is not interested in taking this on. So once you put up these assets, if you build a robust operation maintenance plan, building the community cadre, you will find that these systems will get sustained. Interventions in institutions that I talk about, because collectively they are part of the rural society. And lastly, all of this is something that if we are able to take to district administration as a package, and then they are convinced that this is a model that's working. So in Chittoor, in Guntur, in places in Andhra, in places in Telangana and Sangareddy, we are actually trying to scale it up across the district, whether it is a water quality surveillance model, or whether it is a water security model, or a groundwater recharge model, without taking this model to the district administration and ensuring that it is scaled up through some sort of technical assistance. We will be continuing to grow from Gram Panchayat to Gram Panchayat without, ensuring that this doesn't scale at all, right? So I'll end here, Trishant. Happy to take questions. I had a bunch of recommendations, but I think I've captured most of it in my presentation.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. So I would like to request the audience to take 30 seconds to answer a poll for us. The purpose of the poll is to help us understand you a little better so that we can curate the topics that we bring to you. You can let us know in the chat box how you found out about WishwaTalks. If you're a WishwaTalks subscriber, heard about it through friends or family, or found out about the event on social media. While you take the survey, I would like to express my gratitude to everybody who has joined us today for their presence and interactive contribution to making this webinar a success. I extend my gratitude to our respected speaker, Mr. Rajesh Rangarajan, for taking time to grace the event. Yes. So we got a question from an audience, Sapita. She's asking, can you please elaborate on the ways to harvest rainwater in urban areas?
So do you want to collect the questions, Trishant, or can I go?
Just so you can go on. I'll keep adding questions on that.
So the urban context is very complex, right? Today, fundamentally, we have urban building laws which mandate rainwater harvesting. So any new apartment, any residence, large gated communities, all of them are mandated to have rainwater harvesting. So this is, in some sense, this has been mainstreamed. But what's challenging is how to maintain them, how to revive them, right? So let's take some of the buildings that were built 15 to 20 years ago, let us say apartment complexes. Say, for example, in Hyderabad, I've come across that there are these classic, 5-story buildings with, 20 apartments, 10 apartments, 12 apartments, which have been built when none of these laws were mandated. Then how do you retrofit that building to ensure it is rainwater harvesting compliant? That's the challenge that we are looking at. And the second challenge that we are looking at is, where is the plumbing capacity to ensure that this retrofitting happens, right? There may be capacity, but there's not interest, because a large part of the workforce today that is involved in construction business is deployed in new projects. It is actually, a lot of this workforce actually comes from comes from elsewhere. It is not localized. So where is the capacity? Even if there's interest, where is the capacity, right? So retrofitting of existing buildings to make them more water harvesting compliant and looking at capacity to do this are the two biggest challenges that I would say we are facing. But having said that, there are several organizations that which have cracked this. One of them I know is Maran, that they have retrofitted tons of buildings to make them harvest more rainwater. We have done this in urban setting in schools. This works very well for us, and we are in partnership with the government of Telangana School Education Department to also demonstrate this. Is that the roof water and the runoff water is something that we can actually measure and recharge. And this is done through simple structures, like I mentioned, a combination of pipelines, a simple filter media, and a water receptacle with filter media and the injection shaft to take the water down. And this is something that even the local plumber might actually have an idea about. This doesn't require a hydrogeologist to come and give you a design, but this is something that can be done. So, and there are several context-specific questions, context-specific issues also, and many gated communities which have taken very active interest. They have reduced the amount of concretization that has happened in their communities to ensure that there is natural water seepage, right? So you don't need to do something exclusive to harvest the rainwater, but a large part of it can actually be collected and it permeates to the ground as it is. It doesn't require any special effort. So there are multiple ways, and depending on the context and so on and the challenges, there's always a solution possible for rainwater harvesting.
So I'll request my colleague Prerna to take over from here. She'll moderate the questions better for you. And welcome, Prerna.
Thank you, Trishant. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi,
So nice to have you on WishwaTalks.
Likewise.
I'll just coordinate the questions that are coming to you, and I'll take it from here. Thanks, Trishant. I see one hand raised, Dr. Ishwar Kale. Would you like to unmute yourself, sir, and ask your question?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'm Dr. Ishwar from Watershed Organization Trust. We are a 30-year-old organization working into the watershed development, water management, climate change adaptation, and into that. So congratulations to Rajesh to your novel contribution into this whole water sanitation, drinking water issues. Actually, that's much needed into that. So just two small questions. One about, as you might be aware about this whole Jal Jeevan mission, about the government's the major program. So I just want to know your thought on that, because at 2024 means just 1 year, right? They will connect all household with the tap. So what is your collaboration, contribution, networking, partnership into that, and how you look actually this target feasible, not feasible, at what level we can reach into that? So that's one thought I expect from you. And the another small question is about, interestingly, you talk about this aquifer management, managed aquifer recharge into that. And we are very active into that, to be say. And what we say actually, along with the having this injection borehole or the right recharge areas for the interventions. So more important also is that how we literate community on aquifer management, the aquifer groundwater issues into that, and also how we demystify this whole knowledge to them and bring them together actually. So this whole knowledge sharing part with them actually is a very crucial part. So I'm much eager to know from you how this whole knowledge sharing, building their capacities on aquifer management has been done, because we have our own different model for doing that actually. So it will be my interest to know on that actually. Yeah, so these two reflections from your side. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ishwar. Very good questions. And I was hoping that the second question will come up, because we wouldn't have enough time to cover it in my talk. So I'll quickly answer the first question. The Jal Jeevan mission is going on mission mode. And we've seen this in the Swachh Bharat mission. and there is a risk that people will get left out. So on the ground, our strategy has been to work with the district administration to map the habitations which have been sanctioned with Jal Jeevan Mission and the ones which don't, and we try to work on the ones that where Jal Jeevan Mission is not being sanctioned. And even in those where it has been sanctioned, we try and collaborate at multiple levels, right from the vendors who are implementing the program, contracted by government, and also with the community. So one of the things that we are doing, for instance, is that in a location in Vijayanagaram, in habitation in Munjeru, the same contractor is helping us put up storage capacity while he's also putting up pipeline and creating a source for the Jal Jeevan Mission. Because storage capacity is something that is absent in Jal Jeevan Mission. The Jal Jeevan Mission components only looking at providing a source and piping and doorstep pipe water connection. Storage is very significant in our experience, and that is a gap that we are filling. So this is some kind of on-ground coordination and value addition that we are doing for the Jal Jeevan Mission. At some of the other levels, at a national level, we are what are called sector partners to Government of India, Jal Jeevan Mission, Jal Shakti Ministry, particularly on Jal Jeevan Mission and also on grey water management and other aspects. So there we are able to collectivize our experience and influence national governments as to how this scheme could be run well. There is an appetite to hear from civil society on this, so we are trying to use that window of opportunity to do that. At state level, we are empaneled as a knowledge resource center, who as a knowledge resource center, we will be working with the Panchayat Raj institutions, the implementation support agencies on the ground, capacitate them to help get more participation from community and more ownership as the scheme moves along. So this is the other level at which we have collaborated with the Jal Jeevan Mission. But having said all this, I think you're completely right, because after 2024, we may not see any interest in this, and we are really worried about the post 2024 phase. After Jal Jeevan Mission is over, how much of interest will national and state government have in some of these issues? So, and that's the reason why there is a rural wash platform that's been formed. I can sort of discuss with you about this. If you're already aware of it, then fine. But if not, I can share more information. And the idea is to galvanize civil society partners to ensure that we look beyond 2024. After the Swachh Bharat mission is over, ODF++ is over, Jal Jeevan Mission is over, then what, right? That's going to be our agenda. So on the second part, on connecting the aquifers to the community, and it's actually the other way for us. We find that when we are doing aquifer mapping, we are actually learning a lot more from the community through their anecdotes, through their elderly people's conversation on what have been the trends. And then if we go back and sort of take measurements on, say, that particular borewell that dried up 20 years ago, and this borewell, which, every summer, this is the only borewell that seems to give water, and so on. And then we take measurements depending on that. We find that actually helps us get more insights on where the aquifers are. And once this information is obtained by us, we are not able to take the sort of interpretations directly to them. But what we do is we try and integrate it into what we call as water security planning, which you may be aware of, right? So we say that here are where your aquifers are, and this is potentially the amount of volume of water that is at your disposal. Now let's map the kind of activities that you're doing in your habitation or in your Gram Panchayat. How much of water is being used for agriculture, how much is going for domestic use, for cattle, and so on and so forth. And let's start to budget it. Let's just like, we tell them that you have a monthly income of so much, and this is how you spend your monthly income, and you budget for things. Similarly, you budget for your water. And this is a conversation that we have over 2 to 3 days. We take them to sites where borewells have dried up. We take them to sites where we show them what a watershed looks like. And basis that we see that, they start to relate their traditional knowledge with what we are showing them on the field, and then start to understand the concept of budgeting. And once they understand the concept of budgeting, that is then translated into what's called the Gram Panchayat development plan. So there we identify, okay, so now we need, this is the total amount of water you need for drinking. So maybe this is the kind of infrastructure that you need. You need one more storage tank. Maybe you need a few more pipelines. And now this is the hardware that you need to integrate into your Gram Panchayat development plan and budget for it, and then submit it to the government so that you can use 15th Finance Commission for the Gram Panchayat development activities on water. And that is how you will reach water security basis the water budgeting exercise that you have done. So this is the entire sort of value chain that we try to bring in while we communicate our findings, etc., with the community. And of course, a bulk of our delivery is highly demystified. It is non-technical. It is more through storytelling and so on. And this is done through community facilitators and volunteers who are actually from the community and who speak that language. So that peer-to-peer influencing is also more effective.
So when you mentioned that after 2024, when the mission will get over, what will be the next step? So is there a part in the planning that is the short-term planning and this is the long-term planning? When I say that, I mean that when we are helping solving the scarcity in the rural area, do we make sure that it is done for a longer term? So that the whole scarcity is resolved, the water scarcity for that area is resolved for a longer term, for a longer period of time. Is that also part of an organization's planning or also a government planning?
In government planning, no, because often governments are restricted by their tenure, so they tend to plan only for 5 years and not beyond that. But as organizations, yes, we should have that hat of long-term planning. And that's the reason why a lot of our efforts go into protecting the source, which is missing in Jal Jeevan Mission, which is missing in some of the other initiatives that might have happened. So, for example, just to give you a specific example, when we ensure that we provide water and we are creating a new source, we first test the water, right? To be sure that there is no contamination, there's no fluoride, arsenic, etc. And then we, hydrologically determine where we want to put the source. And then the borewell is dug and water is provided. And then the water is tested again after a period of time to ensure that this is. And now all of this is done with something called a field testing kit. And this is again, given to the community and the social capital that I was talking about, the grassroots technocrats, they are trained to do this. So whenever they sense there is some kind of contamination, they can test it and take care of it. So that is kind of embedded into the human systems of it, and it's not in the sort of technological systems. In the technological systems, what we attempt to do is that we do yield tests of borewells, right? Now, yield testing simply lets us know that there is enough water in the aquifer to provide for so much people for a particular duration of time. Without these yield tests, many of these borewells could dry up. We might be putting in borewell, it will only be a temporary solution, 1.5 lakhs down the drain. So the yield test will really help us understand the longevity of that borewell. And when we look at after providing some of these source sustainability measures like injection shafts, rainwater harvesting recharge structures or recharge pits and all of that, we have a system of monitoring the groundwater level through the various observation wells that we locate, and we train the community to tell them that you need to monitor this. If you monitor your 10 or 11 dug wells you have around your community, you will have a better sense of what your water levels are. And some of the organizations, we have not done this, but a group called Vasan has done this, as they've trained the communities to actually do borewell pooling. So not all borewells are used at the same time. Only a portion of the borewells are used, so that all the borewells are not sucking the water at one go. So some of these strategies need to be put in place. Some of it is something that, part of it is something that we are doing through our community work. But there's a lot more that can be done in terms of sustainability measures.
I'll take more questions from the chat box. Meanwhile, if someone wants to ask question live from Sir, they can use the raise hand option. Ms. Radha says, self-governance at community level is a great initiative. How are you working on the mindset and behavioral change that's required to sustain?
Again, that's a very good question. And in fact, that's also a very challenging part for us these days. It's easier for us to, build structures rather than working with people and changing mindset. So if you see in WaterAid ways of working in several locations, we have been there for about 5 years, in some cases, or even 10 years, and then we have exited. During this period of time, the way we've been able to influence behavior is to have repeated engagements with these mandated institutions. So these PWSEs are a significant part of the information that actually flows out to the community. If they are convinced, then the community is convinced. Right now, let me take an example of let us say sanitation behavior change. Right, so this is something that is a classic case where India faced this challenge of getting a large part of our people to start using toilets. And how would we do this? Now, there are multiple ways. Of course, one way is to try and identify the behaviors, the triggers, understanding what leads to this trigger or what doesn't trigger the need for using a toilet, mapping those triggers, and then working on the information that is required to ensure that that trigger is enabled. So there could be, so for example, men are pretty much the people who keep violating the open defecation issue. Women and children seem to have a better sense of why this. So by targeting women and children, by ensuring that they become the torchbearers for this, you will find the men automatically fall in line. So there are various ways of doing this. There is no one particular strategy. For example, in Hyderabad, we were part of a campaign called Water Leadership Conservation Campaign, WALC. And one of the innovative things that was introduced by the Hyderabad Metro Water Board is to have this kind of a painting of red, blue, and green, red, green, and blue, I think. So they did a sort of a observational study of which are the RWAs which are using higher amount of water through their supply statistics. And they went and marked them red, basically saying that you're very high volume consumers of water, you might want to check your use. And then once over the period of time when the campaign started to move on, they found that in some places the demand changed, some places the demand came down, and then they went them and labeled them as green, that they are shifting. And then there are highly sort of water conscious RWAs which were branded as blue. Right now, once you see your neighboring RWA being branded as blue and you are red, and then there is this sort of indirect pressure on you to also become water positive. And this has happened in some RWAs in Hyderabad. So in urban it works differently, in rural it works differently, in issue to issue it works differently. But there's a lot of scope for innovation and creativity to help do this behavior change. There are many strategies also, time-tested strategies which are available. Some of those can also be utilized. One, for example, is the RANAS strategy that we used for sanitation in Raichur, that you can look up, RANAS. That is an effective strategy for behavior change. So such strategies do exist, and depending on time, budget, the appetite for it, you can deploy different kinds of strategies.
Okay. Mr. Akash is asking, is there any cheapest solution to save water overflowing from water tanks? Individual houses and often don't use already available solution due to budget issues. I want to share them such solutions if there are any.
So this is a bit of a technical question, but I think what I have seen is that you have these automatic cutoff systems that are available. Yeah. Now, many of them are in the market. So, depending on the size of your tank and, what budget you have, these systems will help you, automatically cut off water supply as soon as the tank becomes full. And I think this is a low hanging fruit, and you can actually do it quite easily.
And an alarm system also is available, I guess, these days.
There is this very innovative solution that I came across. Sorry, Prerna, just take 30 seconds.
Oh, sure.
So when Qua is the company, you might want to look it up. Through a system of sensors, they're able to actually understand within a flat of, say, within an apartment complex of, say, 20 or 50 apartments, they sense the amount of water that can be used, or that is being used, and that is being wasted through a bunch of sensors that they put together, and they create a dashboard for that resident welfare association. And then there's a live feed of water consumption, with which individual families and their uses can be tracked. And this will help to ensure that you have a meeting and understand who are the high volume consumers, who are the low volume consumers, etc. So there are technologies like this also. Because you mentioned the word sensors, though it is not directly related to that question, I just thought this is something that is becoming popular, and increasingly gated communities are aspiring for some of these sensor systems.
Okay. So one more question is there. How can an individual contribute for rural water security?
That's you could contribute to WaterAid. That's one way of doing it. But the other way is to, I think, try and save the amount of water, and try and save water from an individual effort. So suppose you're using 150 liters a day, see if you can just bring it down to 100 liters a day where possible, because we can assume that the other 50 liters can go to some rural family somewhere. Because, say, let's take the case of Telangana or the Mission Bhagirath, for example. The water is actually going for both rural Telangana and is also coming to Hyderabad. So the source is the same, it's coming from the Krishna Godavari basin. So every drop of water saved here, it will cross-subsidize water for another rural community elsewhere who actually have dire needs. So this is one simple way of doing it. You could look towards organizations that are working in this space. There's WOTR, there's Water for People, then WaterAid, there is WASN, which works in the rural landscape a lot. Volunteer with them, contribute them whatever you can. You can ensure that this money will be well spent. Aquadam is another such organization which does excellent work on groundwater. All of these organizations actually need support to continue their work, right? And so any contribution towards them financially, if in case you were not able to get down and work, this financial contribution will be quite helpful to a lot of these organizations.
Definitely. I see Dr. Ishwar has raised hand again. I'm sure he has a lot of valuable things to add. I'll just take 5 minutes to talk a little bit about Vishwa's endeavors, and then we'll get back to question answers. So to some of you who have attended this session for the first time, I'd like to tell a bit about Vishwa and the endeavor in the social field that we are contributing towards. So Vishwa is an integrated online platform for everyday change makers and social champions. It's a crowdfunding and a crowdsourcing platform that is aimed at helping anyone find the support they need in their efforts to fulfill the dreams for themselves and for others, and in the process, make the world a better place. In addition to WishwaTalks, in addition to the thought-provoking talks that on Vishwa we are having, we also want to extend the curiosity for exploration to our youth and young ones as well. We have launched 2 new segments of WishwaTalks, namely WishwaTalks Youth and WishwaTalks Junior, to facilitate learning and important conversations in the bright minds of the new generation. Stay up to date for our first WishwaTalks Youth and Juniors to be launched shortly. And you can subscribe your children or the schools around you for WishwaTalks Junior and help them get the information that is not there in the textbooks. We also have Vishwa materials, where we share, where in this economy, we can share and things that are unused in your house, things that are old, which can be a treasure to someone else. Imagine living in an economy where sharing is truly caring, and whatever you didn't need, whether it be books, electronics, furniture, toys, could be easily picked up by someone who needs it. Vishwa is bridging that gap and is collecting materials from anyone who does not need it to someone who really needs it and becomes a treasure for them. This last Diwali in 2022, we did a donation drive. We collected materials from all over Hyderabad and we donated to some organizations, and they were very happy. We collected a lot of materials like books, furnitures, lot of, like, there were people who donated so much of the items, and the children to whom we donated back, they were so happy to receive that. There were some fundraisers that got successful on our platform. One of that was Shrujana. Shrujana's principal of a government college started this fundraiser. She is a girl with cerebral palsy. In March, Shrujana, a student with cerebral palsy, was able to leap one step further in an academic career, thanks to her generous donors of an electric tricycle, which helped her to commute to school. Her fundraiser goal was met in just 15 days with the help of Vishwa's crowdfunding platform. Like Shrujana, there are many who need your kind help. If you like to make donation to a good cause, or you see someone who needs help, you can start your fundraiser on our platform. Similarly, Totapalli Zilla Parishad School received a support from Indian Plumbing Association. They adopted a toilet for girls. These girls were not having toilet in their schools, and this organization has adopted making a toilet, and soon they'll start the project. These girls used to travel, or in the breaks used to go to the neighbors' houses to, for their washroom breaks. And it was very sad, it was interrupting in their studies. This association, Indian Plumbing Association, has adopted the fundraiser and will start the work shortly. Similarly, we have many such fundraisers on our platform. One of those is Kanna Ashraya Foundation. Only one fundraiser I would like to bring to your attention. It's Rajamundry-based foundation dedicated to helping specially abled children from underprivileged background by providing them education, food, living, accommodation, as well as healthy environment for growth. They have appointed special trainers who are experts in teaching special education and vocational learning. They are not charging these children any fees at all. They need your contribution to continue to support these children. Any contribution will help ensure the continuation of the education, accommodation, and provision of amenities for these children. We have fundraisers which are helping HIV children in Telangana. We have fundraisers for visually impaired children, for old age home elderly. I would request you to please visit www.wishwa.org/fundraisers. See the cause that is close to your heart and please support them. Some of these fundraisers will also give you ATG benefits, which will help you save tax as well. Coming back to the questions that we have, Dr. Ishwar, would you like to unmute yourself?
Prerna, I understand there is a time, or else I can directly get back to Rajesh personally. Or is there time for taking the
Rajesh,
question?
sir, we can ask, sir, if you are okay, we can continue this conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm very glad actually this the discussion came about this whole, the normative concerns about this whole participation, equity, sustainability into that in a larger context of demand side management. Okay? So what I found into that actually, it's all about this whole water budgeting practices, how we can make it more participatory in the sense, and not only we consider the drinking water component into that, securing drinking water, but water for overall ecosystem, the biodiversity, even this ecosystem flows. So that may be the larger the planning when we do the water budgeting, water allocations for the demand side management. So I think that could be the one of the area where we should focus. But to my specific the question, not question, the reflection is on that how, while we all try to make a water secured villages or water security into the villages. So how we can really understand and let's say rate or evaluate this whole water security at different scales actually. So one village, at what level the water security has been gained by this village, or what level of water governance has been gained by this village and the another village and another village. So whether there is some type of standards or some type of the scale of measuring the water security achieved by village. So that can help to understand where is the gap into that village, particular village, in which indicator or parameters that gap can be filled. So that can give a very objective diagnosis to that village where they are falling short to address this issue. And also appreciation for the villages who are doing good into the water security. So we are also thinking into that and developing some type of tools and model into that, but it will be good if Rajesh has some reflections or some past experience into this actually to assessing, judging the performance of villages on water security. Yes, Rajesh, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ishwar. I think that's a nice suggestion indeed. And we have actually not thought about it specifically in the form of a sort of an index or a rating criteria on how secure these villages are. We have attempted to do this in a few baseline studies that we have done in North Karnataka or in other places like in Kerala, where we did the baseline prior to our program. We attempted to create some kind of a vulnerability index on the scarcity levels. How many hours they're receiving water, what is the level of infrastructure, etc. So that was an index that we set. So maybe sort of stretching that index to, once all these interventions are done, having a end line after that will then help us understand, okay, how the shift has happened, and therefore we can say, the water vulnerability criteria became a water positive criteria. So just trying to transform that and developing a set of criteria first, I think might be a useful exercise to do. We have done this, just to sort of draw a parallel to the community systems and processes, we have developed something called the VWSE self-assessment tool, where the Village Water and Sanitation Committee actually assesses itself on the number of issues that it's discussed, it's solved, how often they've been able to do that, how participatory they are, and so on. And that has helped to, give us a proxy value to how water secure or wash secure that habitation is. So the more vibrant the VWSE is, the more wash secure that the habitation would potentially be. So this is some kind of a proxy that that could work for water security or water security. But I think that's a good idea, and maybe we should think of this and actually see if governments would be interested in kind of looking at this rating, because that will also help them target the Jal Jeevan Mission better. It will help the Gram Panchayat, the 15 Finance Commission expenditure can also be targeted better based on the Gram Panchayat development plans and how water secure or so what I mean is, basically, if there is a highly water secure village, then maybe the Gram Panchayat, the 15 Finance Commission funds can be reduced for them, while there could be another Gram Panchayat which is highly water scarce, and there could be more funds sanctioned for them. So there's potential applications for a scarcity index or a security index that you're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Rajesh, for that. In fact, I will share the whatever work we are doing into this water governance standard, and I'd like to take your reflection, comments into that, because that is in line of this whole water composite index developed by the Niti Aayog. So we are going at the downscale, and soon we are coming with that tool. So I'll share with you, and your feedbacks are welcome. Thank you.
Certainly. Prerna, I think you're on mute.
Prerna, you're on mute. Please.
So sorry. Thank you, Dr. Ishwar. With this, I would like to end the session. We'll move towards closing it. And I would like to inform the audience that our upcoming talk is on 21st January at 11 a.m. again. We are going to talk about importance of comprehensive sexuality education. Rishi and Sani are the founders and managing director of Torchbearer Foundation, and they are going to highlight on this topic. It is one of the causes that we support, and the next topic is on that. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please, if you are from Hyderabad, you can donate materials, any unused items that are there in your house, office, and you can call this number that is there in the chat box, and you can drop the materials in one of those pickup centers, or call this number and they would help you out basically. If you want to be part of any causes that we have, want to support this fundraiser, you can dial in the same number, or you can directly donate from the link that we have. You can look for the tax benefit fundraisers. The tag is available on the website as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this Saturday. The details would be continuously available on the screen. If you have any questions further that you wanted to ask Rajesh sir, you can drop the questions here. We can give it to them and we can revert back to you on your email. Thank you so much. See you on the next WishwaTalks. Stay tuned. You can subscribe to WishwaTalks and stay updated about any event that is going to come up. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
I would
Thank you.
request
Thank you, everyone.
Rajesh sir, please join the breakout room for a quick debrief session.
Sure.
Team, can you please initiate the breakout room?